Now tonight we're going to give you just a little bit of biology from God's world and a whole lot about the supposed missing links. Now I'll tell you the end of the story first. They're still missing. First off, let's refer to God. He said in Romans 1:20 and 20 through 22, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes were clearly seen, being understood by things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools." We live in a modern age in which we think we control the universe. It warns us not to worship the creation, but the Creator. And we need to focus upon that. But we're going to show you a little bit of the handiwork of the Creator tonight. Giraffes. Giraffes are a fascinating animal. Tall, unbelievable neck. Question is, when you're 18 feet tall, how do you get blood to your head when you're standing straight up? Our hearts couldn't do that. Well, the answer is that they have the most powerful pump of all mammals. They have a 2.5-foot long heart, which weighs 25 pounds, to pump that blood that distance up to the head. They have the highest blood pressure of all land animals, and they have the thickest vessel walls of any mammal to accommodate that kind of blood pressure. They also have one-way valves in their necks like we have in their arteries, just like we have in veins. You may not know it, but in your legs, you have one-way valves in your veins that between heart pumps, when there's less pressure, the blood does not back up in your legs because of these one-way valves that only allow blood to travel up and not backwards. The giraffe has, those same type of one-way valves in its arteries so that when between pressure pumps, the blood does not back up. It's an amazing thought. How did he live before those things were put in? He has enough blood pressure to burst all the blood vessels in its brain when it bends down. But as it happens, when its head lowers, two things happen. See, this is a huge problem for evolution. Just by bending down to get a drink, he ought to blow his brains out. Because he already has this huge blood pressure created by his huge heart, followed by gravity now helping rather than hurting. And so he should literally blow his brains out by bending down to get a drink. But God designed it so that two things happen when he bends down. One is all those valves close, not allowing blood to keep coming from the heart. And the blood, which is still speeding on its way to his head, is shunted because before it can get to his brain, all blood is shunted to the back of his head through a sponge-like organ in which this blood hits that sponge and is diffused, protecting his brain so it only very slowly gets into the brain. So he doesn't blow his brains out simply because of these one-way valves and because of the sponge organ at the back. And this lowered blood pressure going into the brain keeps his capillaries from absolutely exploding. This is pre-designed. But he's got another problem. He bends down, and this sponge prevents all this blood from rushing to his head, and it also, those one-way valves stop the blood, but what happens when he gets up? Now he's got no blood to the head. He should pass out. This, incidentally, is not a good thing from an evolutionary standpoint. From an evolutionary standpoint, if every time you see a lion and you're taking a drink and you say, "Ooh, I better get out of here," and you stand up and pass out so that he gets a free meal, that does not help the species go to the next level. In point of fact, there is no species after that if you can't stand up and simply run. But God designed for all this. The new problem is he rises up, there's no longer enough pressure to get blood to his head. He should pass out, but when he raises up, three things happen. The arterial valves open, allowing the heart to pump blood up there. But again, it's got to go up 18 feet. The sponge at the back that is now gorged with blood squeezes itself out to allow blood to be transported to the brain until that blood can catch up in his arteries all the way up his head. And the veins in his neck close so that there's back pressure not allowing blood to rush out of his head. All three of those things happen instantaneously when he rises up and says, I better get out of here. How did he survive until evolution, by chance, by accident, over millions of years, decided to put the, decision's the wrong word, by accident threw those things in? When he doesn't have those things, he doesn't survive. There is no next giraffe. This is an absolute impossibility for science and the evolutionary sciences to explain, but it is a design miracle. It shows that how God thought of everything in advance. And he is not a complete animal that can survive anywhere until he has all of these processes in place. How many giraffes had to blow out their brains or pass out standing up before this was all developed by chance? The answer was none, because God did it from the start. This was designed. It's not viable until fully functional. Now let me give you just one more example of these type of animals, and that's the duck-billed platypus. The duck-billed platypus really does show that God has a sense of humor. He appears in the fossil record fully formed, and incidentally, that's true for all major species that we see today. 450 supposed million years of fossils of a shrimp. What do we see for the last 450 supposed million years? Shrimp. They haven't changed into mighty mouse, super shrimp, or anything else. And the same is true for the duck-billed platypus. No transitional finds. We don't find a half beaver, half platypus, a half duck, half platypus. And incidentally, that's just stupid when you start thinking about this guy. What did he used to be? Something that has a duck's bill, has mammal fur, and lay eggs. He's weird. That's all that you can say about this thing. And he's not going anywhere in terms of evolutionary format. The place they put him in the fossil record, there were already more evolved mammals in the rocks below him. So they can't find transitional forms, and he doesn't fit anywhere. If you don't know some things about the platypus, he has this duck bill. He's a mammal with hair, lays eggs like a bird or anything else that you want to deal with, has poisonous claws, and the way he feeds is through an electric radar sensor in the end of his bill, which senses the very small electronic impulses of feeder shrimp and other small fish that are buried in the bottom of riverbeds, etc., and finds them that way. He detects their spinal electrical impulses and digs in because he knows they're there and gets them. How did this happen by evolution? The evolutionists Gould and Eldridge have classified him as a mosaic. He's not part of evolution. He wasn't coming from anywhere and isn't going anywhere. They punt. They've got no clue how this thing ever came to be. It's excellent evidence for not evolution, but for God's design. And I think also God put this one together and said, hey guys, figure this one out. Yes?
Gould and Eldridge are the founders of the belief system, punctuated equilibrium.
Right.
It helps understand why they were befuddled.
Yeah. What one of our board members is pointing out is that Gould and Eldridge were the two of the three main members who started a evolutionary framework called punctuated equilibrium. And what it basically said was that for millions of years there is no evolution going on whatsoever, and then suddenly there's a lot of mutation in the world, and a reptile lays an egg and out comes a bird. And as I challenged you last time, I said, you've got to shake your head at that and say, there's no way there's science on that. Go and look at the writings of Gould, Eldridge, and Stephen Stanley of Johns Hopkins University. It's exactly what they're saying. And the reason they developed this theory was because they looked at people like, or animals like, the duck-billed platypus and said, okay, there's no way to explain it, so we're just going to write it off. We're going to say that slow, steady evolution never occurred. Okay, what do these animals tell us? Usually I provide a whole lot more examples than this, like the woodpecker, which is a great example, the incubator birds and others, but because of time restraints tonight, we don't have time. What you find from these animals is they did not evolve incrementally. They did not evolve at one small step at a time like evolution teaches us. They had to be fully formed. They are not viable until fully formed. That means they can't live. The giraffe couldn't survive until he could bend down, get a drink, and pick his head up. That simple thing is a miracle of design. They plainly show design in the Creator. Now, if you're interested in more of these kinds of animals that simply defy evolution, we've got 3 videos over there for you. They're called The Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution. Dr. Joe Martin of Baylor University, who you may have heard of, we have him at Feast very often, did these 3 volumes, and it's just absolutely fascinating stuff in which you can simply play these things and say to an evolutionist, okay, explain, Lucy. Tell me how this could be. How could this ever be? It just simply shouts creation, God's creation. The next step in carrot evolution. You really believe that one? If you do, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona I'd like to see. In search of missing links, we're going to look at the supposed missing links and maybe unveil Lucy in an appropriate manner. Psalms 139, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. Unfortunately, what the evolutionary paradigms tells us is you're an accident. Well, let's see what their supposed evidence for your evolution, for your happening by accident really is. See anybody on this group from your family? I always used to joke, you know, I've only been in a creation lecturer and talk and doing talks for 27 years. And I also was a middle school teacher. And it was sometimes tough to tell people, you know, missing links don't exist. But then I see an example in my 5th period class that makes me wonder. Some of them look like that. Left tackles. Left tackles are great simians. Okay. Java Man. 1891, Dr. Eugene Dubois, he was an evolutionist, joined the Dutch Sumatra army just simply so he could travel the world and look for fossils. In Java, which is an island, he found a skull cap and femur, leg bone, about 50 feet apart. Now, my first question to this is, just because you find a skull cap and a femur 50 feet apart, do we automatically know those 2 things belong to the same animal? No, there's a real question where they do. 1 year later, 70 feet further away, he found 3 teeth. Now what's our guarantee that those 3 teeth go with the skull cap and the femur? Not good. The plot thickens. Found in a till drop. All of this material was found in the bottom of an old riverbed. Now what does that tell you about these 3 finds? It's almost guaranteed they're not to the same animal or the same species or the same chimp or whatever it was. At the same level of find, they found 2 human skulls. Now, when you deal in archaeology, what's supposed to be on top? The youngest stuff, the stuff that's more developed. And the stuff underneath is supposed to be older and less developed. So if you're finding human skulls at the exact same level, what should you be finding? Human artifacts, or if you find something that looks like an ape, guess what it is? It's an ape. The 2 human skulls they found were again in our brain range. They were 1,500 to 1,600 cc's. That's about how big your brain is. This was not revealed to people, either that it was in a riverbed, nor that they had found human skulls at the same level. The skull cap was estimated at 900 cc's. As you can see, they've only got the top. So did they have to do a lot of artwork to extend this skull cap and decide what the rest of the head looked like? They really had to. And again, 900 cc's is ape-like, and it's very equivalent to what we see apes today and other extinct animals. Now, this didn't stop Dubois from doing a world tour with his 3 pieces put together. In 1900, another person made a mold of his find, and that's what you're actually seeing here. And there was much debate about that mold and criticism. They were saying, well, we don't know that those 3 pieces were put together right. We don't know that this isn't just the same as the Peking finds. So what Dubois did was picked up his cookies and went home. For 20 years, he just hid the stuff. But 20 years later, there there was an outcry saying, your find is no different than the Peking skulls, which we're going to discuss in a moment. And they were both classified at that point as Homo erectus, which is one of our supposed missing links, or one of the things we used to be. So he came out in 1920 due to public pressure, brought out his finds, and then revealed that his finds had been in a riverbed. Again, it was declared Homo erectus, just like Peking man. But Dubois said his finds were not the same. He said his were more gibbon-like. Okay, they're more like a gibbon. Not like a human, more like a gibbon. 1922, he reveals the finds and characteristics of the site. Again, he told them that it was in a riverbed. Today, most evolutionists think that this thing was just a giant gibbon. But it's still shown in textbooks because some evolutionists disagree and say that it's Homo erectus or a missing link. This, again, was all done from fossils, very small pieces of fossils that would never hold up in court. Note the time cycle, because you're going to see that again and again tonight. A find is made, and he calls a press conference. We have found the missing link. 30 years pass before it's debunked. But by that time, his career is already made. This is what happens with each one of these supposed finds or missing links. Put that down, you fool. It's a bone of contention. Boy, that could be said again and again in this field. Now, just a quick review of what we've talked about before. What does an archaeologist really do? He digs up a bone, and he doesn't even know what he's got half the time. He has some ideas. He takes it to an artist, tells him what he thinks the thing might have looked like, but all he's got there is the top of a skull. And the artist draws a picture. But if you take it to another artist, do they draw a very different picture of the same thing? They do. Just from this skull cap, can you really say that this Cro-Magnon man looked that way? No. Fortunately, we have other finds from that, but what very often is done is you take this little evidence and they draw the entire guy. Folks, that's not science, that's artwork, and we need to understand that. Imagination is not observation. Another story from all this, Neanderthal man. Around 1900, in the Neanderthal Valley near Dusseldorf, Germany, a single brutish, hunched-over skeleton was first found. And they declared an ape man because he had a large brain. In point of fact, these guys had larger brain capacity than we do, upwards of 1,800 cc's, 200 to 300 cc's bigger than us. Now, according to anthropology, if he has a bigger brain, what should be true? He's smarter, he's brighter than we are. This is the one exception that anthropologists accept today, that this guy wasn't smarter because he died off. They don't want to tell the story that way because it messes up their story about evolution. Now again, when they found this guy, taking his bones and giving it to artists, did they come up with just one way that he looked? No, they got him everything from, I don't know, what do you call that, Bigfoot, up to a guy with just a bad haircut. So we really don't know exactly what he looked like just from bones. More skeletons were found in the valley, were completely human. And evolution has sewn up to this today, that modern humans lived at the same time as Neanderthals. Further inspections showed that the first skeleton had rickets and arthritis. When we see rickets and arthritis in bones today, what would CSI say? This is an old person. Larger brains than modern humans, our heads continue to grow till death. Did you know that one? What if you've got a person who lives 800 or 900 years? Could this be the Neanderthals right there? Outpointed teeth. If you keep them long enough, guess what happens to people who are 90 and 100 years old? They start pointing out. Again, is this a possibility that all we're seeing in the Neanderthals is some of those people mentioned in the Bible that were either just post-flood or pre-flood that lived to ridiculous ages? It's possible. We could be looking at the oldest humans according to biblical accounts. Is this a very different story than what the anthropologists tell us? It is. Very different. Mr. Neanderthal forgets to RSVP for Noah. That's why they died off. Probably not, but it's a dumb thought. Peking man, 1920 and 1930 in Zucatan, China, 25 miles from Peking. A single tooth was first found. These guys deal in teeth so often you think they're all dentists. Of course, that makes sense because what's going to be left after thousands or millions of years? Hard parts, teeth, bone, etc. The discovery was made by Dr. Davidson Black, and once he found these teeth, he declared he'd found an ape man. I think it's rather interesting that you can just find some teeth and say, okay, I got an ape man. Supposedly, there were 147 teeth, 30 skulls, and 11 lower jaw bones were found. I say supposedly because we have almost none of this left today to examine. Only 2 human teeth remain. What happened in Peking and in China after 1925? The Japanese invaded during World War II, and all of this stuff was lost except for 2 human teeth. The only thing that we can look at today are drawings and molds that were made of what's there. We have none of the original bone to examine. Supposedly 20 or so Peking Homo erectus skulls from the lower caves, which were broken up. Let me give you a different story for what all this was, because there were human skulls found there and these supposed Homo erectus or ape skulls, depending upon your interpretation. In many cultures, what is chimpanzee, ape, or monkey? It's a delicacy. What did they find in this lower cave? They found broken up pieces of these ape-like skulls. Was it possible the humans were having dinner? It is real possible. And again, since there were supposedly 10 or so human skulls from the upper cave, my scenario is every bit as good as the people who say, well, from the lower cave you had the ape men. Look at how much artwork is involved in all this. Peking man, all we've got is these broken skulls. When you see this complete one right here, is that what we actually have today? No, we have none of the skulls. They never had a complete skull to begin with. Did they have to play Humpty Dumpty and put this guy together and then draw in the missing pieces? They did. That's artwork, not science. But they didn't stop there. You can see right here some of the pieces that were supposedly put together from Peking man, and then they filled in the rest with plaster Paris, which again is guesswork. But they didn't stop here and say, okay, this is what this guy probably looked like. They drew him, his whole body, and his family from that. Science or artwork? That's artwork. It's great imagination. They ought to be science fiction writers. Nebraska man, 1922. Harold Cook found a tooth. Again, the dentists are getting involved. Famous tooth, misinterpreted by Dr. Henry Osborne, who was of the American Museum of Natural History, as an ape man's tooth. They called a press conference and declared, we've found an ape man. Folks, what did they find? A tooth. We found an ape man. This was used by Clarence Darrow in the Scopes monkey trial to really dumbfound William Jennings Bryan. Bryan did an extraordinary thing during that trial and actually took the stand. And he was asked by him, hey, we found this remains of this Nebraska man, which is half ape, half man. How do you explain this? He did not tell Bryan, we've only found a single tooth. He might not have even known that. The implication was, we found a full skeleton, which shows half man, half ape. Of course, Bryan couldn't explain it. So really, there was a little bit of a lie put forward there. What's interesting to me is out of one tooth in the London Journal, actually it was in the Illustrated London News, they printed this picture of Nebraska man with his family. They knew all this from a single tooth. Again, Bryan was not told of the evidence of an implied full, they implied that it was a full skeleton, and this picture shows how much imagination and artwork are going into all this stuff. Now, here's the bad side or good side of the story, depending upon your attitude. 10 years later, a jaw was found in the same area near the tooth. The tooth fit perfectly into the jaw. Ooh, we found the jaw of the ape man, except the jaw and the tooth belonged to an extinct pig. This pig made a monkey out of scientists. Piltdown man. 1912, Charles Dawson called himself an amateur fossilist, found a partial skull in Piltdown, Sussex, England. It was an old-looking skull, very yellowed, very dirty. Canine teeth, unlike any other in an ape-like jaw. In fact, these canine teeth were not human, and they weren't canine, and they weren't ape-like. They didn't know what to make of these teeth, but they were different. They were very sharp, canine-looking teeth. Dawson declares it a transitional form, a missing link. He has a press conference. 50 people did anthropological dissertations on it. 45 people got their PhDs doing studies on this jawbone and his skull. In the 1950s, the last doctoral analysis did a fluoride absorption test. And what that is a chemical test on the skull to find out how much fluoride was in the skull. From that fluoride absorption test, they dated the skull to about 40 years old. Wait a minute, if this is a missing link, how old should this thing be? Millions of years old. How could it date at just 40 plus years old? It made no sense, so they did a little more digging and a little more investigation on this find. And the teeth were examined under a microscope, and they find that they'd been filed down. This whole thing that 45 people had gotten a PhD on was a total fraud. Is it still in the textbooks? Yes. Cro-Magnon declared a transitional form between the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Supposedly between the brighter guys, the Neanderthal and us, there was Cro-Magnons. But their characteristics are identical to modern Europeans. If you give this guy a little better haircut, clean him up and shave him, folks, what do you got? Us. It was fascinating one time that I took a set of Neanderthal pictures of their skulls, Cro-Magnon pictures of their skulls, and supposed modern Homo sapien skulls, and showed it to a group of doctors that I was talking to one time. And 5 of them said, you know, I've had every one of these skull types walk into my office this week. Walk into the office, okay? They're still here. It's not like they're the missing links. Some finds of Cro-Magnons have outpointed teeth like Neanderthals, showing extreme age. This again could be due to their great biblical age. They had highly developed societies, language, art, etc. Does this sound like they're developing or already developed? They're already developed. Australopithecus, I dare you to say that one 3 times real quick. There are several finds. The first one was by Raymond Dart and then the Lakeys. The Lakeys were a famous couple that spent their lives in Africa digging up bones. In 1924, Dart found a skull which he called Australopithecus africanus. He had a press conference and he said, we found the ape man. Is this story starting to sound familiar? Dart had found an unknown species. It had a 500 cc brain capacity. This is small ape size. This is monkey size. Ape-like skulls and jaws. So it's all ape-like, but he has strange teeth. Again, the dentists are getting involved here. Along the time that they found Australopithecus, they also found a group called Ramapithecus, which is an artistic drawing here, which I'm going to comment on in a moment. But they put Ramapithecus as just below or just ahead of Australopithecus. This is another extinct ape that they try to put into our chart. What have we found of this guy? Well, we found partial skulls, we found partial arm, leg, and skeletal bones. But have we found enough to tell you what his hair looked like, how well he could sit, and that he could be this thoughtful when he's looking? No. Why did they draw him in such a thoughtful position? Because they're trying to say this is us in the future. Again, it's artwork, even though this guy had totally ape-like characteristics. It would be more truthful to have him hanging from something. Lucy, you've heard of Lucy. Australopithecus afarensis. In 1974, Richard Leakey, the son of the famous Leakey couple, found this, and another person, Donald Johansen, interpreted it as a transitional find, as a missing link. Now, it was only a 40% find, and I'm going to show you what they found in just a moment. It had a gibbon-like skull configuration, but no snout. One thing about gibbons is that when they're children, they have almost a flat face like humans, but as they develop past age 3, they develop this snout which hangs out, which is very ape-like. This guy had no snout, so it was gibbon-like, but only of a young gibbon. Here is what they had. Again, there's no snout, and this is only a 40% find. In point of fact, folks, this is what you normally find in anthropology. You almost never get a 100% find. You get bits and pieces. This is better than normal. Look how much artwork had to go into this guy. They took these bones, which they found, and get a complete skeleton. What is all the white stuff? Plaster of Paris. It's artwork. It's what they've decided she looked like, but they have no proof of that. That's not science. That's artwork. That's what drives the artwork. They make a decision that they've decided that this is what we are, that we are just apes walking around well, and that drives how they draw it. In point of fact, they take these bones right here and draw complete pictures of what she looked like. Isn't that fascinating science? No, that's not science at all. That's complete supposition or artwork. Yes, ma'am? No hands or feet, and yet they drew hands on her. And guess what? There are no feet, and yet if you go, somebody told me one time they saw a Lucy exhibit with very human-like feet. Now, I think it was in St. Louis that I heard about that. And again, the thing is, there's no feet on this thing whatsoever. Why did they draw on human-like feet? Because they want her to be human. Well, here's another, oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong Lucy. I'm sorry. Now, what was not revealed for many years was that the skull fragments of Lucy were found a mile away from the torso. Now, we were wondering about one that was 50 feet away. What can I really guarantee you if we found something a mile away? It's not from the same species. It's not from the same animal. Now, when they were questioned about this, Johansen told the public, well, we could see similarities in them, and so we put them together. I'm glad that they have X-ray vision. A toe was found 10 miles away. This guy was found all over a county. And they put him together like Humpty Dumpty or like a Tinker Toy puzzle. Lucy's knee was found 10 miles away in strata 200 feet deeper. What's it supposed to mean if it's 200 feet deeper? Millions of years older. So they violate their own rules of anthropology when they piece this girl together. She was under 3 feet tall. They held a press conference and touted it as an upright Australopithecine with no snout. They said she could walk. Their 3.5 million year dating does not jive with evolutionary timescale. It should be 1.8 million. No snout is consistent with a youthful gibbon. Now here's where it really got bad 15 years after they found Lucy. They found out with a computer analysis of her leg that she could not walk upright. And that was the whole deal. The whole deal about Lucy was ape-sized head, ape-sized body, looks like a gibbon. If she walks like a gibbon, she's a gibbon. But they thought she walked upright because she had a little bit of a turned out hip, and they thought her knee would be good. Of course, the problem was, where did they find the knee? 10 miles away. And the hip was not right for walking, but it was weird. It was different. So let's call it half and half. When they did the computer analysis of her legs, they found this. A gorilla or any type of ape has a fairly straight leg bone, whereas humans have an exaggerated angle. This exaggerated angle allows our bones to be at angles when we stand up and allow us a better opportunity to stand and walk correctly. Guess which type Lucy had? The straight-up ape-type bone. That proved conclusively that could she, as a chimpanzee, walk for a period of time? Yeah, but not well. So what's Lucy? She's simply an ape. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the horse series. Eohippus, which is a small three-toed runt, this guy was basically a rat, which supposedly lived 120 million years ago. Evolves into Merychippus, which has one toe with two declining. Evolves into Equus, that's our modern horse, which has one toe. This looks like great evidence for evolution. You have the modern horse, which is one toe. You had this little guy. Now, what's really bad is when you start looking at this, you say, ooh, it's the same size. No, it's not the same size. This was on a guy the size of a rat. So really, this thing should be about that small right there. So this is 3 to 4 toes to 3 toes to 1 toe with 2 going away to 1 toe. Looks like a great deal for evolution, except here's the problem. This guy has been found down here in the strata. So supposedly the horse is what? The oldest of these. That's Merychippus, my fault. Horse has been found at the bottom. Merychippus has been found on top, and this guy's been found in the middle. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that from looking at the strata, these guys are absolutely what? Upside down and backwards. And one of the grand problems for evolution is, if this guy came before this guy, how do you have a grandson buried before his grandfather? You can't. That's an evolution impossibility. That is a scientific impossibility. So for this reason, most evolutionists today will not even show the horse series to you. So why am I bringing it out? One, does it still appear in some textbooks? Yeah. But if you went to the Whitty Museum's show, that I'll call it, last year, was there a huge display of this horse series there? There was. And I could not believe it. This thing's been debunked now for 20 years, and yet the leading evolutionists of our time trot it out. Why did they trot it out at the Whitty Museum last year? One is children. Is this an extremely clean example of what they think evolution should be? Yes. It's an animal. It's a horse animal they can relate to, and it gives a very clean example. But it's not just the example, folks. They don't have any better evidence. Why do they have to trot out frauds? Because that's all that there is. Again, it was an excellent example of a transitional form. The geologic column does not support it. They were found in the wrong places of the geologic column, upside down. And now evolutionists use what they call a bush theory rather than a tree. They say, well, maybe all these things were kind of made at about the same time. Wait a minute. Isn't that what the Bible says? It's exactly what the Bible says. Now, let's quickly review what we've talked about tonight. The standard lifespan for a missing link is about 15 to 20 years. Horse series was found in 1874. By 1944, it had been disproved by evolutionists. So my 20-year claim was incorrect. And we've really known that the horse series didn't hold water for more than 70 years. Java Man, 1891, it's found. They had a press conference. 30 years later, there's agreement that it was probably just a gibbon, especially after he revealed that he found everything in a river bottom. Piltdown Man, 1912. 45 PhDs later, in the 1950s, it's revealed that it's a complete fraud. But had its founder already had his career made? He already had. Peking Man, found in 1930. By 1946, there's no evidence left whatsoever of these supposed half ape, half men. And I told you a better story for how all this could have been. Nebraska Man, 1922. 10 years later, he's a pig. Lucy, found in 1974. By 1990, we find she can't walk, which was supposed to be the whole thing about Lucy, that she was an ape that could walk. Now we found out she can't walk. What they did over and over again is they find these finds, and to make their careers, they have a press conference and say, we found the missing link. Now, I've only given you the big ones over the past 100 years, folks. There's a lot of nominees out there. Right now, they're looking at Artie and all other sorts of weird things to say that we've still got the missing link. The point is, what do I expect to happen with Artie and all the other finds they come up with? Give them 15 or 20 years, and we will disprove it. Because what do we see with human beings just like we see with every other kind? We find them fully formed in the fossil record. That's what true science does, is we look at the evidence and don't try to draw it like they've tried to do over and over again.